In this Lord of the Rings Rise to War video, I'm going to help you figure out which commanders are worth picking because you can only have so many that you focus on in any one season. So stick around in this video to find out, for the good side, what are the 5 best commanders that you should invest in, or if you're fully free to play, maybe we narrow it down to the 4 best commanders that you focus on these commanders and you are going to have a great season. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and I am really hyped to present this guide to you, prepared with my alliance members in the Smash Squad. This is a collection of alliances that we run together. We'll be recruiting very soon for an upcoming season, but also special thanks to drucifer again for brainstorming this master list. This is the list of commanders. If you weren't sure, which ones do I pick? These are the ones you pick. Now, we put together a tier list very recently, reviewing all of the commanders and how I would rank them. However, in any one season, you can only pick so many commanders, and commanders typically do different things. For example, Gandalf, really good at taking tiles, pretty solid at fighting evil, pretty solid. You've got commanders like Gimli that are really, really high damage, but have certain vulnerabilities as well. Commanders like Eowyn that are universally good, and without spoiling the entire list, commanders are good at different things. But you couldn't go into a season and run all 5 mounted unit commanders and expect it's going to go well. You can't recruit mounted units that fast. So this is a curated list giving you a blend of things, thinking about several factors. First of all, how many mounted units can you really conscript in a reasonable amount of time and field at once? And in my estimation, that is 2 commanders using mounted units. It is a blend of units that are good at different things: tile taking, high damage, healing, etc. Also, I wanted you to have a way to go and do things like dragons and balrogs to get gold in the season, like all of these things that are really, really important. So let's start with the pay to win list. Commanders that you have access to potentially if you're big spending. And I have been big spending and I don't have access to all these commanders, but we'll go through this list anyways, and then we'll hit the free to play list and some substitutions. Let's start with tier 2 commanders. And by the way, this list is going to be free of T3 commanders, 0 T3 commanders. You can swap out one of the commanders I'm going to recommend if you get so lucky as to get a T3 commander. And I'll tell you, we have someone in the Smash Squad who spent over $2,000 on this game and got 0 T3 commanders until they hard unlocked using respect items. It's kind of gross. So I'm not going to count on anyone getting any T3s for this list. If you get one, you can weave it in based on what it does and make a substitution. However, T2s and T1s. The number 1 commander is going to be Theoden. Theoden makes the list because he is the number 1 T2 commander and honestly should have been T3. And from a lore standpoint, it was brought to my attention, would be good if the kings were all like T3s together, but whatever. Theoden is just God tier. He's very good. You want to use him if you have him. Now, if you don't have Theoden, a good substitution is what I did, which is Éomer. I got a full letter unlock of Éomer. I'm pretty happy with Éomer overall, although I think the Theoden is stronger. Éomer is a bit more of a glass cannon. Theoden is kind of like a better Éowyn, and if all of that sounds crazy to you, don't worry, we'll explain that in just a little bit. So, first up, we have one Cav commander, that is Theoden. Second commander, and this is actually the first one you should work on, is going to be Gandalf. Now, Gandalf is just a beast. Everybody can get him. You can't be like, oh, but I don't have a Gandalf. You should have a Gandalf from using your math and medals in Season 1 to go unlock Gandalf. And even at his just base level of unlock, he's really, really, really good at taking tiles. So you've got to have Gandalf. He's the first commander you're going to work on because he's just God tier for minimizing your losses when you take tiles. And eventually, you probably mock battle your way into a Theoden because you're going to have a hard time maintaining enough cavalry and building enough cavalry at the start of the game because they are a harder to recruit unit. And in case it wasn't clear what that means, this will matter a lot to you at some point if you're being pressured, and if you're having a fun season, you will be. But if you just get a look here at how long it takes to recruit a non-mounted unit, we're talking about a grand total of 25 minutes per command, whereas if we look at a cataphract, same tier of rarity, 40 minutes per command. It is much longer. So this is very important to keep in mind, that the conscription speed of these units is slower. You cannot run lots of commanders that use mounted units, and it's a dangerous choice to run as a primary commander a a commander that is focused on mounted units at the start of a season. The next commander I want to talk about is someone I wish I had focused on this season, and I didn't, and he's level 50, but only because he just got there, and I basically haven't used him at all, and that is good old Gimli. Gimli does a lot of damage, but also Gimli is really cool for his Protect Elves ability, making it so that a Dwarven unit takes the damage for an Elven unit. So you can have your Bow Knights in the back and something else, well, it's going to be the Guardians in the front taking the damage, and that's just a magical combo, and you can use a healing build while you're leveling up, focusing on Lockbearer, but then later on, go with an all damage build like I've done here, and he is just really fantastic for rounding out your kit of having Theoden, who is just all around solid, and you can throw it at anything and expect to get a positive trade, Gandalf, who's really strong at tile taking and good against evil, and then Gimli, who counters commanders that heal like Gandalf and can potentially counter a Theoden. I want to see some reports strongly proving it, but it can be done, okay? So this is the commander I'm going to recommend as one you could start with early-ish, but Gandalf is probably the better number one pick as your first commander. And similar to using the Gimli, the number 3 commander, who I didn't even use this season, and it's like, in hindsight, I understand why he's really good, and he might be the second commander you actually work on. I mean, I don't know, between Gimli and Dwalin, maybe you just do Gimli, but the commander that I should have invested in this season and didn't is probably Dwalin. Dwalin is the number 4 commander on this list, and they're not exactly in a particular order, but Dwalin is one of the ones you could and perhaps should invest in early, because he is great for battling dragons. Now, Gandalf can also be really great for battling dragons, but you do need to have him at higher levels of loyalty, and you battle dragons to get gold from the Heart of a Hero event, okay? So, back to Dwalin. Dwalin is kind of like a mini Gimli, okay? He can do a ton of damage with his damage build very quickly and take out Gandalfs. And I got hit with some Dwalins that did some nasty damage to my decked out commanders. Dwalin is one of the stronger D1 commanders in the game, and to sort of make it even better, his unique weapon here is actually pretty good. So when you get him up to respect level 10, you can do some serious work, and this is probably where you would make your investments at T1 for the unique item. Dwalin is really, really good. He's good against Gandalf, good against Arwen, good against Mummas, good against Balrogs and Dragons, and that brings us to the final commander, the second mounted commander that you'll be bringing, and that is Éowyn, obviously, you knew where this was going, right? Éowyn is another one of those commanders where you just sort of roll your face on the keyboard and collect victories, and that's not exactly true because she's not as good as Theoden. Theoden is the better version of that. But Éowyn is just really, really solid at doing a lot of damage, but minimizing her losses, and you stack a ton of speed on her, and she's just so easy to understand. She's so easy to get high loyalty for. And if we just look at her portrait real quick with the build that I'm running, ideally you run all men, you max out all this stuff in the White Lady of Rohan, you max out Frontline Rescue, and you bring all melee units, and you just freaking smack. Also, Rohirrim is obviously 100% mandatory. When you're stacking all that speed, it's just so, so good. She does so many things so well. She's got more damage probably than you're going to crank out with your Gandalf, but also great sustain as well, and is very versatile in doing well at pretty much whatever you throw her at. Also, stun immunity, pretty freaking sick. Stun immunity comes from the White Lady of Rohan, another reason why that's just so, so important to lock up. And those are the 5 commanders that if you were pay to win, you'd want to go and invest in. And if you didn't have Gimli, you do have other options that you could go with here that are just really strong. Those recommendations to you, if you didn't have Gimli, would be either Legolas or Balin. I think would be very adequate substitutions. And I mean, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, they're better at other things. But just Gimli is so versatile that that's going to be the recommendation. Theoden, Gandalf, Gimli, Dwalin, and Éowyn. But what if you're free to play? You're like, Chisgule, bruh, I don't have all these commanders. What the heck do I do? Good news for you. You have most of those commanders. And I'm going to recommend fewer commanders so you can concentrate your equipment. But you'll have to decide for yourself, based on how many seasons you've been playing, how many commanders you think it's actually reasonable for you to go and field. So the commanders that you're going to use if you're free to play is going to be Gandalf first and foremost. Again, everybody can get Gandalf. Season 1, it just takes a little longer to unlock him if you're free to play, but put literally every Matham you have into unlocking Gandalf until you have unlocked Gandalf. Not even kidding you. Finish off that chest for Gandalf. Gandalf is freaking amazing. And he's really like, the commander you start the season with is very important. Late game, late season, he kind of falls off actually in terms of power level. He's still good. Don't get me wrong. Very good. But compared to how he is like 11 out of 10 at the start of the season is what I'm trying to say. You're going to use Gandalf. You're also going to use at T1, Éowyn and Dwalin. So probably Gandalf is your number 1, Dwalin is your number 2, so that you can go in and make sure that you're also able to battle dragons pretty early on in Balrogs. Get that gold, baby. You got to get that gold, baby. And then the final commander I'm going to recommend to you is going to be another T1 commander. And I think he's relatively synergistic with the ones that I've presented because he's going to use a different respect item. So this is important. Each of these commanders is using a different respect item, right? We've got for Éowyn, the saddles over here, right? We've got the mushrooms, whatever it is. Okay, I got superior horse armor all over my screen and I can't get rid of it. There we go. For Dwalin, we've got the pipeweed, okay? And then, okay, this is very curious. I love when technology works. For Haldir. Haldir is the one I'm going to recommend, and he uses a separate respect item. It's the bread, the lembas bread. So the reason that I'm going to recommend Haldir, as I struggle once again to get this off the screen and tap everywhere, is that Haldir is just all around pretty solid. He's got decent sustain in this bottom tree over here with guide, and which, by the way, for a brief time is going to give you stun immunity, which is freaking amazing. And then Armed Escort gives you some healing based on your focus stat. He's also got some kind of interesting stuff here with poisoning and doing some damage over time, and also giving your archers follow-up, which, by the way, is a chance to have 2 attacks in a single round. There's some stuff you can do there with special units that's very powerful. He has got a really solid kit. And look, in the world in which you have Theoden, Gandalf, Gimli, Dwalin, Éowyn, they're better, in my opinion. But if you don't have those commanders and you're working with these T1s, dude, Haldir is fantastic. And I'll say that his unique item is like fine, as I still have Forest Agility up on my screen. Maybe I can, okay. Anyways, it's just going to stay there. His unique item is fine, but it's not what I would pick compared to the other options. Again, Dwalin is your pick for the unique item, in my estimation, of these 3 commanders. But Haldir is a commander you can get a lot of use out of. You would be tempted to potentially run a beast build with him. I was. It was just okay. The beasts were very expensive. It didn't do all that much more for me. I would stick to ranged units. I would stick to speed. And his sort of perk, if you will, is going to be when you are defending. If you're able to get all the way up over here, Fortify is pretty decent, right? Reducing the physical damage you receive for 1 point each, 2.5%, is pretty good. That's a lot of damage reduction for the amount of points that you're putting into there. I think this is good, although somewhat constraining. So Haldir would be my final pick for you. And then you focus your equipment on those 4 commanders, and you'll notice that I only did 1 Cav commander there. We've really reduced your conscription time as much as possible because, look, if you're not running the very best equipment, you may not have as fast a start if you aren't spending as much time, although time can offset that. And so you've got to be able to recruit units that are not quite as expensive. That's the list. If I were starting a new season right now, and we're about a month away from that happening, those are the commanders I would be using. I used Arwen this season. I would not use her. I leveled up Éomer and Éowyn really quickly in this season, as my number 2 and 3 commanders, but I found very quickly that the healing build on Éomer was not cutting it. I was losing too many troops. And on Éowyn, just in general, I leveled her up and it was good, and I liked using calves, but I think if I were doing this all over again, right, I start with Gandalf Gimli as my 2 first commanders that I would run with. And if I were running a new season, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing, right away. And on the topic of new seasons, very soon, the Smash Squad is going to be recruiting. I'll have more information about that in a separate video, but you might want to subscribe if you're interested in playing with our group. as I've mentioned before, we've got folks that are in voice basically around the clock, like actually almost literally 24/7. There's like 5+ people just hanging out in voice, talking about the fight, the good fight that's happening, and also talking commanders and equipment. And I mean, it's just a really great environment to enjoy the game because let's be real, like as fun it is just like watch my unit march like 5 minutes to go, you know, take out a a mob that I'm sweeping. I mean, as I struggle to find a 5-minute away mob, sure, this one, right? Like, as fun as it is to watch my unit walk back and forth, it's a lot more fun when you're hanging out with cool people. So, enough about that. If you enjoyed the list, throw a like on here, consider subscribing. And if you want to swap in a T3 commander for, you know, any of these lists, I think in the free-to-play list, if you were to get such an unlock, you'd probably swap out your Haldir, or you'd consider going to 5 commanders. In the list with pay to win, I would say probably your swap out is Dwalin, because you've already got Gimli, unless you really wanted to double down on those like high damage commanders, but it really depends a lot on what exactly your T3 does that you got the unlock for, you know? That'll change around what you ultimately do. You enjoyed this, throw a like on here, consider subscribing, and until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies.